My journey was to bring cybersecurity on the board agenda, to make sure that we report regularly to the supervisory board, to our finance community, that to make sure that actually cybersecurity is one of many risks a company is facing. How can we make it better? I think the first step is always education. I think its first step is knowing what is possible already right now on the white side and on the black side. The second step is regulation. I think regulation helps us to stop discussions, and it brings lots of clarity and brings momentum in the things which are beneficial. Always challenging your own assumptions on everything. Challenging assumptions on your limits, challenging assumption of who you can be and who can you become. It's tough because sometimes we live in the box of how society puts us into, and then you need to challenge that.
Hi, Julia. Welcome to Be Fearless podcast. It's such a pleasure to have you here with us.
Aleksandra, thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Having in mind how long it took us to really come together, it seems to be like a chance of a lifetime.
Yes. So many time zones. I think when it comes to security leaders, you always have to stay on top of things. So whatever and whenever someone calls you, it's a bit tricky to figure out with time zones, but I'm super glad we're here. And I just want to give background to our listeners of who you are and what we're going to be talking about today. So Julia actually is a group CISO at Haniel, and you have over 15 years of experience in cybersecurity industry, building security programs as well. And it would be very interesting to learn your perspective, how your role evolved, and you actually oversee strategy for 7 majority investments across industries from manufacturing to technology. Also, Haniel is known for its focus on sustainability, which makes this job even more complicated, even more meaningful. And you're also a global ambassador for Global Council for Responsible AI, and you promote responsible use of AI. So I think this is the topic that we can't skip today. Super excited for the conversation, but maybe let's start with the present. Tell us more about your work at Haniel. What's it like managing cybersecurity for such a diverse portfolio?
Aleksandra, thanks for this question. In fact, it's an amazing challenge. I love the variety of the companies in the portfolio. And maybe starting from the top, Haniel is one of the oldest family-owned companies in Germany. And our portfolio really goes into the topic of diversification. So as you mentioned, we have with a total of 22,000 employees, now actually 11 companies in the portfolio, which really represent each industry you would think of, starting with retail, online business, manufacturing, and we even have a kindergarten in our portfolio. So looking at this from the perspective of cybersecurity, you could imagine that bringing one single standard in all this quite diversified portfolio could be a challenge. So when I started 2 years ago, I took my time to understand the portfolios, to understand what they really need. And interestingly, when I was speaking with each of the CISOs, because each portfolio company has their own governance, has their own CISO, I asked about the biggest challenge. And guess what? They didn't ask for more budget. Interesting. I was expecting that. They didn't ask for the new firewall. They actually asked for stronger governance in the area of cybersecurity. And this was like one of the first steps which I started working on, to make sure that cybersecurity is not hiding somewhere in the cellar where all IT people are, and only treated as IT purely topic. My journey was to bring cybersecurity on the board agenda, to make sure that we report regularly to the supervisory board, to our finance community, that to make sure that actually cybersecurity is one of many risks a company is facing. And it can be also translated in their universal language of the world in the thousands of euros or dollars, depends where you act, right?
Yeah.
And this language, actually your board understands. So looking back in the 2 years of the challenging way, I think establishing governance, establishing common language, how we speak about cybersecurity, establishing common reporting, so tracking and monitoring was really beneficial for us. And now we can really deep dive and also work on the technology topics.
Yeah, it seems like I can't even imagine how potentially troublesome was to consolidate so much information for such different systems and infrastructures. What is one of the biggest challenges that you had to overcome as you're working at Haniel?
Yes, well, as mentioned, the first challenge was to set up the governance. The governance which is helpful, which is not controlling only, the governance which brings cybersecurity on the agenda of the board, right? And then the second, of course, to collect all the data. And often when we are working in the cybersecurity world, we are collecting already many data on the internal side of things. Like we have all our CMs, we have telemetry, we have data coming from the network. We have also, like if we are having phishing campaigns, something from the email. So we are having so much data internally already. However, when I started, I noticed that we didn't have external exposure. So this was one of the steps to introduce external exposure. We are working with one of the providers who is helping us with a continuous external exposure visibility and bringing these two perspectives together. Like internal view on all the data we already have, and actually external view, how our customers or perhaps cyber criminals could see us. This was the magic, and this was the challenge to bring these two views together.
Okay. Could you elaborate a little bit more on the external? Because just for our listeners, what do you think was lacking, and what do you think you had to really, do to emphasize it?
Well, in terms of the external exposure, there are many good providers in the market, I would say. I think the market is quite saturated, and this is a good news. What was challenging when we were searching for a good provider is actually the quality of external exposure. If we are looking for even in the topic of threat intelligence, let's take a simple one, even leaked credentials. We are, as CISOs, we are literally bombarded with some kind of lists coming our way and saying, here we found something. But when you really deep dive into it, you see that perhaps the credentials are very old, like from 2017. They are not really relevant. Right. So I think in the threat exposure and threat intelligence, the relevance is so important. And also the automation to validate the findings. It's extremely important because we as practitioner CISOs, we are not theoretical. We want to act. If we see something like this, we want to mitigate, right? So my call to the providers would be to make any insight actionable, ideally connected perhaps to the workflow, mitigating the finding.
That's very helpful, I think, for a lot of providers that also would be into it, because at the end of the day, I can imagine how much you get bombarded with all the messages, right? And how do you, as a company, sort of go and really assess, okay, these are the risks, when you said like it's so hard to find because so many of them are not really actionable? What really stands out to you and makes the difference that makes you think, okay, this is actually the risk that I want to consider?
Well, what we are doing is we are changing from the paper kind of evidence to the really tested evidence security. So what we are going through now, we are introducing automated red teaming products. Some call them STEM, some call them continuous breach and attack simulation. There are so many names to it, but I'm very practical and pragmatic person. I would believe that this is a threat if I see that it's a threat in our environment. And therefore, the products like that help us really to assess the risk not only theoretical risk that it's something could be exploited, but I want to see exploit in my environment, and then we can see and act. Also, I'm very curious to see the attack path, how this exploit was actually used. Because sometimes if we are speaking about CVEs on your attack path, a CVE which could look very harmless could be just at the beginning of an attack path. And if you didn't test it in your environment, you could oversee it, because we are very much focused on the, like risky ones. And the products like this help us to understand, let's say, the orchestration of the attack, and to understand how to focus our quite limited resources to close the doors. So coming back to your question, we test. We test in our environment, and with this, we then decide how to mitigate.
Yeah, I really love this actionable approach, because with so much noise in the industry, and the RSA just took place, so there was a lot of talk about non-human identity, AI agents, all of this conversations, very valuable. But as you rightfully mentioned, how much does it affect your own environment? That is the question. And you also brought up the subject of visibility, right? Do we actually see this whole attack chain? And what I see in the research is that a lot of attacks are being orchestrated via the browser, and EDR solutions don't have as much visibility. What sort of measures do you typically advise when it comes to threats that originate via this attack surface? And what sort of measures would you advise and kind of react to the threats?
Yeah, I think the classical security of let's say unintegrated tools is slowly coming to the end. I'm very much curious about SASE development, and to give us a little bit broader overview of what is happening on all kind of surfaces, not focusing only on the network, not focusing on the, let's say, the endpoint, but bringing this all together there. And of course, coming back to your question, of course, the enterprise browser or secure browser will help us to reduce the number of attacks being cross-site scripting or whatnot, right? So this could be the first step to review, to introduce something like this in the companies. But I mean, a classical approach to block malicious sites could be efficient, but again, with the speed of artificial intelligence, you can now set up a page within seconds, right? A new domain which is not perhaps known as a malicious one, so you will be always one step behind, and therefore I think the enterprise browser basically filtering on the source of all the evil is absolutely useful.
Yeah, that is very true. And as we use a lot of AI, attackers also use AI to come up with the techniques, create a website literally in the 30 seconds that afterwards, used to target enterprises. So all of these points, very, very relevant. I wonder what kind of threats do you think still need more focus today that many people don't pay enough attention to and should be paying more attention to?
Well, let me start with two of them, which immediately come into my mind. First of all, the more AI we will be using, the more automation we will be using, the more APIs we will be using. We are already using now tons of APIs. And if I'm honest, I don't think that API security is not at the level where it should be, and it will increase in importance in the next years. Because we don't want to have LLMs just talking to us. We would want to have something with agentic AI, right? Doing something for us. And how is it done? Of course, through APIs. And now thinking, where are your secrets, right? How do you even protect this database? Or how can you basically control that the APIs are not kind of fired by the actor, which is not allowed to do this? And also how to coming now, making a bridge to responsible AI. What is the human oversight in all the zoo of APIs you have do you even need a human to oversight it? Is it even possible with human to oversight this kind of complexity we will be seeing in the next years? So I think API security is definitely an important one. Another one is code security. We have seen attacks where their actually original company code was injected with some malicious components, right? We have seen in the last year the library, right, XYZ library, which was injected with malicious code. Like amazing effort was done over the years to actually manipulate the code. So, and then coming back to the CrowdStrike disaster, which it was not let's say a cybersecurity disaster, but it was actually the hygiene process of releasing the code and checking the code. And the impact on the infrastructure, the impact worldwide we have seen in all kind of sectors was actually due to the code. So my focus would be for the next years, also for providers, governments, and regulatory bodies to make sure that security by design is not just an empty buzzword, that we have really perhaps even automated stages of reviewing the code, perhaps with support of AI, to make sure that we have certain security guardrails already in the product, making sure that our code is secure, and making sure that the code which is used in the critical infrastructure is as stable as possible, working into the future that the disasters like CrowdStrike disaster cannot happen due to the multiple reviews regarding the stability of the code.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the incident, if I had to pick on the CrowdStrike case, also proved the concept of single point of failure where, such a disaster affected so many companies. And I was just having a podcast with someone that invests in cybersecurity space. And he was just saying it woken up so many industries that weren't really focusing on such a big issue as cybersecurity. It suddenly wakes everyone up, and to look actually and focus how their codes are checked, how everything is checked. It's so valuable at this stage. And I have to bring up the fact that you're also a global council for responsible AI. What are the most pressing challenges when it comes to AI adoption that you see today? We did speak about how it's leveraged, but what kind of role that you're driving to achieve by being a member of this council?
So basically, first, maybe we can start outside of the council and generally on the road of adopting AI. Yeah. I think adopting AI is being a challenge. If you are looking into the traditional industries, there is still mindset. It doesn't apply to us. Right. And I think it's very dangerous mindset because actually it applies to everyone. It applies to each industry. And we need to be prepared to kind of cannibalize our own business in order to be future proof. And this is a painful process. And it's important that the management has this one on their radar. Being able to being really revolutionary in rethinking and reimagining the way they're doing things right now. Even let's put an example, a very classical one of sales. Right. If you look on sales, like years ago, even 10 years ago, there were still physical sales there. Like you needed really to go to somebody to sell the product and show the product. Then we had the next step where you had an online marketing, so you didn't need to go anywhere. You would have an online platform having all the products, right, and kind of consolidating the offering and demand. Now coming back to the next step. Will we be still selling to people, or will agents be selling and buying stuff from each other? I mean, if we're looking at the stock market at the moment, probably there are machines who are driving the transactions, but look at everything. I think in the future, if you are a business and you are selling your product, you need to think who will be buying it, who will be driving this transaction. Do we still need a UI as human interface, or would we need something which is collaborating on the machine side, machine-to-machine interface? So I think in terms of even adopting AI, there is lots of challenging to reimagine and even to think in the way how our future would be in 5 years from now. Now, coming back to the responsible part of it, my heart is beating for the AI which is serving with benefit to humanity. And I think there are lots of great use cases which we will see in the future in the area of medicine, in the area of creating new, more sustainable products, more sustainable materials, perhaps even solving the energy crisis, etc. So there is lots of potential. At the other side, as we know, each invention comes with contra-invention. So the technology itself is neutral, but the way how we use it is this is the art for us as humans to use it for the benefit. And the less beneficial side is, of course, I was participating in one of the panels, which was driven by the United Nations for actually disarmament. And they were discussing about their, autonomous drones, right? And ethical decisions in the warfare, right? Like war by itself is harmful. And then when we are bringing technology on this, it just super scales on the global level. So what are the challenges and how can we make it better? I think the first step is always education. I think its first step is knowing what is possible already right now on the white side and on the black side, right? The second step is regulation. I think regulation helps. Regulation helps us to stop discussions, and it brings lots of clarity and brings momentum in the things which are beneficial. So clear regulation should be done. However, it should be actionable and not a burden of bureaucratic burden. And then finally, if we are coming to the area of cybersecurity, I was always asking myself, is AI for cybersecurity or cybersecurity for AI?
What do you mean by that?
So will we have more AI serving cybersecurity sector, or will we need cybersecurity to protect AI?
Interesting.
So I think it's the later one, because if we really want to use AI in the responsible way, in the sustainable way, in the way which will, survive over the years, we will need to protect it. And then I think that cybersecurity for AI is the paradigm which I'm looking into, thinking, okay, how can we actually make AI more robust? Thinking, do we have perhaps certain techniques to red team AI to check if it's stable? And this kind of industries are still in the developing, and I think in the future we will see more products and more techniques to actually check AI, to make sure it is stable and to protect it.
Yeah, it's very interesting question that you brought up, because I was just looking into it, and with the introduction of purchasing via ChatGPT tools, right now it actually can share malicious links with the user, and we are so trusting towards whatever the chat box suggests to us that, we do need cybersecurity for AI. And I think it should be a perfect marriage of the two, whether AI helping with cybersecurity or cybersecurity helping with AI. Right now, it's definitely a topic that shouldn't go off someone's radar. And I'm curious, how do you see the adoption when it comes to companies that are in your portfolio? Is it something they're excited about, or is it something that sort of not put at the front page?
Well, I think the perfect answer would be the classical one, which is it depends. So, of course, we have companies who are on the forefront and, running in the first line and wanting to experiment with technology, building their first pilots and really, super excited. And every week we have an exchange to see what is the newest LLM, the most powerful chip, and all these discussions are going on. At the same time, we have industries, as mentioned, who ask ourselves and say, like, we are not impacted. We are classical industry. We don't see big benefit in adopting AI. And I think there is the magic is to show them really pragmatic use cases which can be started quite fast. And then, of course, let's speak about the elephant in the room. There is also fear of losing jobs or changing the status quo, or what is the impact on the human side of things. Also thinking like it's about the kind of a recognition of us as humans who can, serve the world by doing something. And if AI overtakes these tasks, do we receive this recognition back? So there are many layers. We can speak about the economic one. We can speak about motivational one. We can speak about ethic one, right? So there are many layers. And when you have a conversation about adopting AI, we need to speak to all of these layers. It's not only the economic layer, which drive us, of course, to the high efficiency. We need to think what impact, what sociological impact is reached by activities like that. Because, of course, being effective on one side and kind of triggering the wave of unemployment on the other side should not be beneficial for the society in the balanced way.
Yeah, definitely. There are so many values and layers and concerns to think about that it really has to be a joint decision. And when, since we're on topic of values, I did see that Haniel values Enkelfähig. Did I pronounce it correctly?
Yes, almost perfect. So actually it sounds like Enkelfähig, right? And thanks for bringing this up. Basically, our company being founded in 1756, we thought, what is the DNA of the company? And the DNA of the company is being able to survive through many generations, to be alive, actually, through many years, through many centuries. And this is the concept of building something on the solid ground, which basically is able to withstand external conditions. Yes, this is the concept. How do you like it? How does it resonate?
I really like it. And I wonder do you think in some way it influences your cyber practices as a leader?
Yes, absolutely. Basically, this concept magically kind of attracted me for this job, to be honest, because I thought cybersecurity is basically the ground. This is the solid ground which we should be building on. And that's why the security by design is so close to my heart, because if you create a product, if you create a code which is secure from the beginning, from the very first thought, it can survive. Right? It can survive. It can grow. It can, gain trust of the customers, etc. So you would have so much less problems being a product if you have created with security by design from the beginning. And this is, I think, where we have the parallels to Enkelfähig of thinking to build things which can withstand the centuries, which can withstand the generations.
Yeah, it's always about the foundation. If the foundation isn't great, then it's like everything that is built on the top becomes shaky. So it's all about foundations. And your background was IT program management, cybersecurity, even consulting. Why cybersecurity? Why is this industry? There are so many industries. Why that?
Yeah, well, excellent question. Actually, I think it's a bit of coincidence. Back then, when I was driving large and complex global projects at DHL, one project came across my way, and basically it was about introduction of a hypersecure portal for very sensitive information. And at that time, bringing something like that into the cloud, just at the beginning of the cloud migration, was actually a revolution. I think it was one of the top 5 applications we brought into cloud. And there where my journey started, a very deep dive, jumping into rabbit's hole with all kinds of encryptions to understanding whether this encryptions is good enough. How do we manage the key? And even I went to audit actually a cloud provider to see the computer rack where our data is stored, and from this, actually, it showed me that cybersecurity is such a broad field. It's on the physical side. You can go in physical and network security. You can go into the encryption. It's about algorithm and mathematics. And of course, for me, it's the main, because this portal was for quite of a management board. It's about explaining cybersecurity on all levels, from technical one to the executive level. And this span, it just stuck with me, and I thought, wow, this is the field where I want to work with. And then the next projects kind of continued. And actually, I need to be thankful for one of the mentors. He was the former group CISO of DHL. Who just appointed me to one of the projects where I needed to manage 800,000 identities. And I said, okay, wow, it's a huge one. But I think it's important to overcome this fear, because coming back to your podcast, being fearless. I think it's important just to take a step on the journey, and the journey will bring you where you need to be. Of course, with readiness to learn a lot, to learn very quickly, to grow as you go. But this is fun. This is great to have the journey like that. And I'm super thankful that at that time somebody trusted in me and basically gave an opportunity to deep dive in the world of cybersecurity.
Yeah, I think those those mentors are actually the biggest turners in your career, because one of colleague of mine was also sharing, it's all about people, like not necessarily the role itself, but how excited a certain person about whatever they're doing. And then this is something that's actually turning you towards one direction or the other. If you could implement one policy or practice universally across all organizations to improve security posture, what would it be?
You know the answer. It's super easy. It's security by design. It's super easy, because this starts just at the beginning, at the foundations. And if I would have a magic wand, and if we are speaking about machine created code, I would wish that if we create code with AI, that we have a non-disputable condition that each code is reviewed against their cybersecurity frameworks, and making sure that it's secure just right from the beginning. It would make me extremely happy.
Yeah, it would be extremely great. And I just wonder how many, if we lived in a perfect world, how many of breaches we have to deal with? Probably not that much. Half of the industry won't exist.
Yeah, this is actually an interesting discussion I had with, I think she's VP of Google Threat Intel, and we have asked ourselves, what if we would eradicate all the cyber criminals? What if our laws would be so efficient that nobody would even want to start a cyber crime, because there would be really, really serious kind of consequences to that? What if? And then we sat for a second and said, we would be unemployed, right? And then we were asking and going into the chain and asking ourselves, what is the economic impact of that? Did somebody calculate that? I would be so curious to find out the number to this question. Like, what if we would eradicate cybercrime? How much cyber industry what would be the loss? It's an interesting theoretical question.
It is very interesting. And whether it's like physical security or cyber security or any field, whenever you have to sort of fight against the adversary in a way, I guess, provides employment for so many people. I would be also very curious to find the answer to this question. So, Julia, we have this little tradition on our podcast where typically our previous guest would ask question to the next guest. So, our previous guest asked, what is the hardest lesson you had to learn in your life, whether it's personal or cyber related?
Wow. What a question. Well, thanks for my previous predecessor to asking this question. What is the hardest one? The hardest one is actually, well, I will start with one which is very relevant. I'm not sure if it's the hardest one, but it's very relevant. It's actually always challenging your own assumptions on everything. Challenging assumptions on your limits, challenging assumption of who you can be and who can you become. It's tough because sometimes we live in the box of how society puts us into, then you need to challenge that. Another one is, of course, challenging assumptions on cybersecurity. Having lots of data, telemetry, etc., doesn't mean that you are secure. You just have a lot of data. And then bringing another perspective and perhaps another view. It's super important that we are becoming, a little bit more suspicious in what is going on. And then challenging assumption about what is going on generally in the world. I'm speaking now about disinformation and fake news. So if it's a video, if it's a picture, it doesn't mean that it happened, because in the past this was a proof, a factual proof. Now we need to be really challenging and keeping this critical mindset. And I think, and perhaps it's not the most difficult, but it's difficult to do it every day and every second. So I would just like to, it's my own challenge, which I'm working on every day. It's not easy. And that's what I would like to share.
Yeah, no, it is super valuable. And the most interesting part is that you don't even know that you have the assumptions unless someone else typically challenges you and you're like, oh, I was preconditioned in a certain way or manner. And it's always good to challenge oneself. What question would you like to ask to our next guest?
Well, the question would be a classical one. What advice would you give yourself 20 years back from now?
Yeah. That is a classical question. No, I think it's a great question. I think it's actually kind of question that I typically ask like a few guests before, and so many controversial answers. So many people wouldn't have ended up in cybersecurity or ended up somewhere completely different. I'm curious.
The reason I'm asking this, I think just last week I had a chance to see and meet Jan Easterly, who is the former director of CISO and a personal role model for me. And actually, she was asked this question, and I found it so great how she answered, because she said basically staying and being your authentic self is extremely important, because everybody is taken. It's only you who is there. So it's important to live yourself, live your true self, being it as a professional cybersecurity, but also a person sticking to your values. I found the answer very good, and therefore I think the question is brilliant. So I'm very curious for the next one on this podcast, and I will be definitely following up to the answer.
Yeah. I'll make sure to pass it to you. Well, Jenny, it was such a pleasure to have you here with us. You strike me as a person that is very, very focused on breaking the systems, but in a good way, where you really look into, okay, is this really a threat or is it not? How is it really affecting my system? And really challenging assumptions, whatever you have to deal with, because there is a lot of noise in the industry, and it's our job to really look through this noise and pick what really is important, what matters, and being true to ourselves, whatever you do in your life. So it's been incredible having you here with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aleksandra, for such a wonderful summary. And it was a pleasure and great fun to be talking to you today. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.